So, I got something super cool for you today on faith fuel freedom. It's a topic that I've been dying to talk about for ages. We're diving into this incredible moment in history when everything changed for Christianity. You know what I mean?
Oh, I'm definitely excited for this one.
So, we're talking about Constantine and that whole massive shift when Christianity went from being this persecuted religion to, well, basically running the Roman Empire. It's such a wild turn of events, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's one of those, pivotal moments and it really changed everything that came after.
I mean, just imagine being a Christian during that time. One day you're hiding in catacombs, and then suddenly, boom, you're part of the official state religion. That's gotta be a total mind blow.
It was a complete reversal of fortune, like literally from persecution to power in a relatively short period.
So today, we're gonna explore how this all happened, what it meant for the faith, and, well, I have so many questions about how it shaped Christianity as we know it today. And I'm super lucky to have Adrian here, who's basically a walking encyclopedia on this stuff.
Well, I don't know about encyclopedia, but I'm definitely fascinated by this particular chapter in history and can't wait to dive into it with you.
So, before we get into the whole Christianity becoming official and everything, I'm super curious about Constantine himself. Who was this guy before he became this massive figure in Christian history?
Well, that's a great place to start because Constantine wasn't, born as this powerful emperor or anything. He actually had a pretty interesting background that really shaped who he became.
Did he come from, a royal family or something?
So, his father was actually Constantius Chlorus, who was like a military commander and later became what they called a Caesar in the Roman tetrarchy system. His mother was Helena, who, and this is interesting, came from a much humbler background, possibly even a stablemate, and she later became a really important Christian figure herself.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't exactly born with a silver spoon then?
Not exactly, no. I mean, he had some advantages because of his father's position, but Constantine actually spent a lot of his early years in the eastern court of Emperor Diocletian, which was kind of like, well, part military training, part being a political hostage, to be honest.
A hostage? That sounds intense.
Yeah, it was this whole complicated thing where Diocletian had set up this system with four rulers, two senior emperors called Augusti, and two junior emperors called Caesars. It was supposed to create stability, but it totally failed when Diocletian retired in 305.
So what happened when Diocletian stepped down? How did Constantine end up becoming emperor?
So that's when things get really, really chaotic. Constantine rushed to Britain to join his father, who was, already ill. When his father died in 360 in York, the troops there immediately proclaimed Constantine as Augustus. But there was a problem.
Let me guess. Someone else wanted the job too?
Exactly. Multiple someones. The empire basically descended into this massive civil war that lasted for years. You had Maxentius in Rome, Licinius in the east, and several other contenders all fighting for power. Constantine had to battle his way through rival after rival.
That's crazy. So he literally fought his way to the top?
He absolutely did. And he was a brilliant military commander, which definitely helped. But what's fascinating is how he gradually consolidated power over about 18 years. First controlling Gaul and Britain then, and this is crucial, defeating Maxentius at the Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312, which we'll talk about more, and finally defeating his last rival, Licinius, in 324 to become sole emperor of the entire Roman world.
So, this Battle of Milvian Bridge, I've heard it mentioned a lot when people talk about Constantine. Was that the turning point for him in Christianity?
Oh, absolutely. The Battle of Milvian Bridge in 312 CE was this pivotal moment that changed everything. So Constantine was marching toward Rome to confront Maxentius, right? And the night before this crucial battle, something extraordinary happened.
What was it? Some kind of sign or something?
That's exactly it. According to the accounts we have, mainly from Eusebius, who was, Constantine's biographer and friend, Constantine had this vision. He supposedly looked up at the sun and saw a cross of light with the words, "In this sign conquer," or "In hoc signo vinces" in Latin. And later that night, he had a dream where Christ himself appeared and told him to use the sign against his enemies.
Whoa, that's That's pretty intense. Do you think it really happened like that?
Well, I mean, there's always debate about these historical accounts, right? But what we do know for sure is that Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint the Chi-Rho symbol, which is like the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek, on their shields before the battle. And then something remarkable happened.
They won the battle?
They didn't just win, they absolutely crushed Maxentius, despite being totally outnumbered. Maxentius's forces were driven back across the Tiber River at this bridge, the Milvian Bridge, and Maxentius himself actually drowned in the river while trying to escape. It was this decisive victory that nobody really expected.
So that victory, that's what convinced Constantine that Christianity was real? That the Christian God had helped him?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. He interpreted this victory as like divine confirmation that the Christian God had power, you know? And here's what makes this moment so significant for Christian history. Constantine, who's now the most powerful man in the western part of the empire, suddenly becomes sympathetic to this previously persecuted religion.
But did he, immediately convert and become a full Christian right after the battle?
That's a really good question. The conversion wasn't like a sudden, complete transformation. Constantine didn't actually get baptized until he was on his deathbed, which was pretty common back then. But from that point on, he definitely identified as a Christian patron and protector. He began, favoring Christianity, ending persecutions, and, this is crucial, he started to see his imperial role as having this divine Christian purpose.
So basically, this battle and vision changed not just Constantine, but potentially the entire course of Western history.
Exactly. That's not an exaggeration at all. I mean, imagine if Christianity had remained this persecuted minority religion. Instead, this battle set in motion a series of events that would eventually, make Christianity the dominant religion of the entire Roman Empire and shape European civilization for the next 1,000 years. It's honestly hard to overstate how significant this moment was.
So, after this victory, what happened next? I mean, Constantine clearly started supporting Christianity, but how did that actually, play out in terms of policy and stuff?
So after the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine made this absolutely massive move in 313 CE. It's called the Edict of Milan, and it's one of those pivotal moments in history where everything just changes,
What exactly did this edict do?
Well, the Edict of Milan was it was this official declaration that for the first time ever granted religious tolerance throughout the Roman Empire. It specifically legalized Christianity, it's hard to overstate how significant that was. Christians could finally worship openly without fear of persecution or, being thrown to lions or any of the horrible things that had been happening to them.
I had no idea. So before this, Christianity was actually illegal in Rome?
Oh yeah, absolutely. For about 250 years, Christians had been living with this constant threat hanging over them. There were these waves of intense persecution where Christians would be arrested, tortured, executed, their property confiscated. The worst was probably under Diocletian, just a few years before Constantine. It was brutal stuff.
That's terrible. So the Edict of Milan just ended all of that overnight?
Pretty much. It was this complete reversal of imperial policy. The edict didn't just say, "We'll stop killing Christians." It went way further. It actually ordered that all confiscated Christian property be returned. Churches, meeting places, personal property that had been seized during the persecutions, they had to give it all back.
Wow, that's incredible! So it wasn't just tolerance, it was actually, restitution?
Exactly. And there's something really fascinating about how the edict was worded too. It talks about religious freedom in these surprisingly modern-sounding terms. It basically says that everyone should be free to follow whatever religion they choose. The actual text says something like, "We grant to Christians and to all others free facility to follow the religion which each may desire."
That sounds really progressive for the 4th century. Was this unusual in ancient times?
Completely unusual. This kind of religious tolerance just wasn't a thing in the ancient world. Most empires had state religions and expected everyone to participate, at least nominally. The Romans had always been somewhat flexible about letting conquered peoples keep their gods, but they drew the line at religions that wouldn't acknowledge Roman deities at all, which is exactly what Christianity refused to do.
So, what was it like for Christians when this edict came out? I mean, can you imagine going from being hunted to being legally protected literally overnight?
Oh man, it must have been just absolutely mind-blowing for them. Imagine living your whole life in secrecy, meeting in homes or catacombs, always looking over your shoulder. Then suddenly, the emperor, the same authority that had been trying to eliminate your faith, is now protecting you. Christians must have felt this overwhelming sense of vindication and probably disbelief too.
Do you think they saw it as like divine intervention? Like God had finally stepped in to save them?
Absolutely. They definitely interpreted it that way. And honestly, from their perspective, how could they not? For generations, Christians had been praying for deliverance from persecution. And then, boom, the emperor himself has a vision of Christ, wins a miraculous battle, and suddenly Christianity is legal. It really did seem like divine intervention.
So, after the Edict of Milan made Christianity legal, what happened next? Did Constantine just, stop there, or did he take things, further?
Oh, no, no, no. He was just getting started. The Edict of Milan was just the beginning. Constantine didn't just make Christianity legal, he actively started favoring it in all sorts of ways. Like he poured massive, massive amounts of imperial funds into building these beautiful churches across the empire.
Really? What kind of churches did he build?
So many! And they were magnificent. The most famous ones were probably St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, built right over what they believed was Peter's tomb, and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, right where they thought Jesus was crucified and buried. These weren't just little local churches, right? These were enormous architectural masterpieces that, sent this really clear message about the new status of Christianity.
That's fascinating. Was it just about buildings, though?
Not at all. Constantine also started giving Christians these special privileges and positions in his government. He would appoint Christians to high offices, which was totally unprecedented. And he exempted Christian clergy from paying certain taxes and from serving in the military or doing other civic duties that might distract them from their religious responsibilities.
So he was basically setting up Christianity to become the favored religion of Rome?
Exactly. And you can see how this created this snowball effect, right? Suddenly being Christian wasn't just safe, it was actually advantageous. I mean, if you wanted to advance in Constantine's government or court, being Christian definitely helped your prospects. So you started seeing all these conversions among the elite classes who previously wouldn't have given Christianity a second thought.
Were these genuine conversions, do you think? Or more like people jumping on the bandwagon?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I'm sure it was. It was probably a mix. Some people genuinely converted because they could now explore Christianity without fear. Others, well, let's just say they might have had more political motivations. Constantine himself was smart about it, though. He didn't actually outlaw the traditional Roman religions right away.
Oh, he didn't? I thought he made Christianity the official state religion immediately.
No, that's a common misconception. Constantine himself never actually made Christianity the official state religion. He favored it enormously, but he understood that Rome was still predominantly pagan, and making such a dramatic change overnight could have caused serious unrest. It wasn't until Emperor Theodosius III in 380 CE, so decades later, that Christianity was formally declared the official state religion of the Roman Empire.
So Constantine kind of laid the groundwork for that eventual change?
Absolutely. What Constantine did was set Christianity on this trajectory to dominance. He shifted all the incentives in society to favor Christianity. He positioned the church to become this powerful institution with close ties to the state. And most importantly, he associated imperial power with divine Christian authority in a way that would define European politics for the next 1,000 years.
It's amazing how one person's conversion could have such far-reaching effects.
Right? And the really interesting thing is how quickly it all happened. In just a few decades, Christianity went from being this persecuted minority religion to being the faith of the empire. By the time Constantine died in 37 CE, the Christian church was wealthy, politically connected, and growing rapidly. The transformation was just absolutely remarkable.
So, after all these political changes, did Constantine have any impact on, Christian teaching itself? I've heard something about a council at Nicaea.
Oh, the Council of Nicaea. Yes. This is actually one of the most important things Constantine ever did for Christianity. So, in 325 CE, Constantine called together this massive gathering of bishops from all over the empire to the city called Nicaea, which is in modern-day Turkey.
What was the purpose? Why did he need to gather all these religious leaders?
Well, you see, Christianity was growing really fast, right? But there were these major disagreements breaking out about some really fundamental theological questions. The biggest controversy was about the nature of Jesus. Like, was Jesus fully divine? Was he the same as God the Father? Or was he created by God and therefore, somehow lesser?
Oh, I see. So there were different interpretations floating around?
Exactly. And the main dispute was between a priest named Arius, who taught that Jesus was created by God and was therefore subordinate to him, and others, like Alexander of Alexandria and his assistant Athanasius, who insisted that Jesus was fully divine and of the same substance as God the Father.
And Constantine just stepped in to settle this theological debate?
Well, Constantine wasn't really concerned with the theological details himself. He was more worried about unity. See, he had this vision of Christianity as this unifying force for his empire, and now it was being torn apart by these doctrinal disputes. So, from Constantine's perspective, he needed to get these bishops in a room and make them hash it out.
So, what happened at the council?
It was dramatic. About 300 bishops came from all over the empire, and they debated intensely. In the end, the council ruled against Arius and produced what we now call the Nicene Creed, which is still recited in churches today. It explicitly states that Jesus is of the same substance as God the Father, using this Greek word homoousios, which became super important.
Wow. And did everyone just accept this decision?
No, not at all. The controversy actually continued for decades. But what's so important about Nicaea is that it was the first time the church used the power of the Roman state to define Orthodox belief. Constantine basically said, "This is the correct version of Christianity, and I'm backing it with imperial authority."
That seems like a huge shift in how religious disputes were settled.
It absolutely was. Before Constantine, Christians might have disagreed, but they didn't have the power of the state to enforce any particular view. After Nicaea, we start seeing this concept of heresy backed by imperial power. Constantine actually banished Arius and some of his followers after the council, though he later let them return.
So, the Council of Nicaea wasn't just about doctrine. It was about the relationship between church and state?
Precisely. This is when Christianity started to develop this formal structure that mirrored the Roman Empire itself. The church adopted dioceses that matched Roman administrative districts, bishops gained significant political power, and Christian doctrine became something that could be officially defined and enforced.
That's fascinating. So Constantine really transformed Christianity from within as well as from without.
Absolutely. And the Nicene Creed, this statement of faith that came out of the council, became this touchstone for Christian orthodoxy going forward. It's hard to overstate how much this single meeting shaped Christian theology for the next, forever, really.
So with Christianity becoming the official religion, I'm really curious about how did all this change the way everyday Christians actually, practiced their faith?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. And it's one of the most fascinating aspects of this whole transition. So, before Constantine, Christians were meeting in private homes, sometimes in secret. They had this very intimate, community-based worship. But after Christianity got imperial backing, everything changed. And I mean everything.
What were some of the biggest changes people would have noticed?
Well, the most visible change was definitely in church buildings. Constantine and his mother Helena started this massive church building program throughout the empire. Instead of gathering in someone's house, Christians suddenly had these grand basilicas modeled after Roman government buildings. The architecture itself was revolutionary. These huge, imposing structures with long central naves, rows of columns, and these elaborate decorations that just screamed imperial power.
I never thought about how the physical spaces would change so dramatically.
Right? And it wasn't just the buildings. The whole aesthetic of Christianity transformed. Before Constantine, Christian art was very simple, symbolic. You'd see the fish symbol, or the anchor, or the Good Shepherd. But afterward, Christian art started borrowing heavily from imperial imagery. Christ began to be portrayed as this divine emperor, seated on a throne, wearing purple robes, with a halo that looks suspiciously like the radiate crown of the Roman emperors.
So the imagery of Christianity began to reflect its new political status.
Exactly. And, this shift wasn't just cosmetic. The actual worship services changed too. They became more formal, more ritualized. Church leaders started wearing special garments that distinguished them from ordinary believers. The liturgy became more elaborate, and Christians started creating this ecclesiastical hierarchy that mirrored the imperial administration.
What about things like holidays and celebrations? Did those change too?
Oh my goodness, yes. This is where it gets really interesting. See, Constantine and the church leaders after him were pretty smart about this. Instead of trying to eliminate popular pagan festivals that people loved, they basically rebranded them as Christian celebrations.
Like what? Do we still celebrate some of these today?
Absolutely. December 25th, for example. This wasn't originally Jesus' birthday in Christian tradition. It was the birthday of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun god who was really popular in Roman military circles. The winter solstice was this major pagan celebration, so Christians just, repurposed it. Same with Easter, which incorporated elements from spring fertility festivals. That's where the eggs and rabbits come from, not the resurrection narrative.
No way! So these familiar traditions were actually compromises?
Totally. And it was a brilliant strategy for mass conversion. People could keep their favorite celebrations while embracing the new religion. Same with saints. Many local pagan deities were sort of reimagined as Christian saints with similar attributes and feast days. Sacred wells and groves dedicated to pagan gods became associated with Christian saints or Mary.
It sounds like there was a lot of blending going on.
Absolutely. This process of religious syncretism was happening everywhere. Even the title Pontifex Maximus, which was the high priest of Roman religion, eventually became a title for the Pope. Christian clergy took on roles that pagan priests once held in society. And Christianity developed this elaborate ritual calendar with feast days and fasting periods that gave structure to the whole year, just like the pagan religious calendar had done.
So in some ways, Christianity had to change to accommodate its new mainstream status?
Yes, and that's the fascinating paradox of the whole thing. Christianity went from being this countercultural movement to being the establishment, and in the process, it absorbed many elements of the very culture it had once defined itself against. The faith became more institutionalized, more hierarchical, and honestly, more Roman.
So looking at the big picture, what would you say was the lasting impact of Constantine's conversion? Like, how did it fundamentally change Christianity's path forward?
Oh wow, that's such a good question. I think it's hard to overstate just how profoundly Constantine's conversion transformed Christianity. Like, we're talking about a complete paradigm shift that, and I'm not exaggerating here, basically shaped the next, 1,000+ years of Western civilization.
That's significant, huh?
Absolutely. See, before Constantine, Christianity was this marginalized faith of maybe 10% of the empire's population. But within just a few generations after him, it had become the dominant religion throughout the Mediterranean world. And the really fascinating thing is how Christianity's relationship with power completely flipped.
What do you mean by that?
Well, Christians went from being persecuted for not participating in imperial cult worship to actually becoming the ones defining what was orthodox and what was heretical. The faith that once criticized worldly power suddenly had armies and emperors at its disposal. And that new relationship with political authority, it fundamentally changed Christianity's self-understanding.
In what ways did that affect the development of the church?
Oh, in every way imaginable. So, first, the church became incredibly wealthy and influential. Bishops became major political figures. Church leaders started adjudicating legal disputes. The institutional structure of the church basically mirrored imperial administration with metropolitans, archbishops, patriarchs, all these hierarchical layers that hadn't existed in early Christianity.
So the church essentially adopted the empire's governmental structure?
Exactly. And this merger of church and state set the template for medieval Europe. After the Western Roman Empire fell, the church was literally the only institution left standing with the organizational capacity to maintain order. And that's why for the next 1,000 years, you couldn't really separate religious authority from political authority in Europe. Kings ruled by divine right, popes crowned emperors, and the church controlled education, welfare, and basically all aspects of social life.
Did Constantine foresee any of these consequences?
I doubt he could have imagined the full extent, but he definitely saw Christianity as a unifying force for his empire. What's really fascinating, though, is how Constantine's conversion changed the very theology of Christianity. Before him, many Christians were, expecting Jesus to return soon and establish his kingdom. They were focused on the next world, not this one.
And after Constantine?
After Constantine, Christians started thinking maybe the kingdom of God could be established right here on earth through Christian rulership. The apocalyptic elements got pushed aside, and Christianity became more focused on building institutions, codifying doctrine, and exercising power in this world. The church became intertwined with the state in a way that would have been unimaginable to first-century Christians.
That's fascinating. Do you think Christianity would be recognizable today without Constantine's influence?
Honestly, probably not. At least not in the form we know it. Without imperial backing, Christianity might have remained a minority religion or developed in completely different ways. The standard creeds, the church hierarchy, the religious calendar, the dominance in Europe, all that stems directly from Constantine's conversion. Even the Bible as we know it was standardized under imperial influence.
So basically, Constantine didn't just change Christianity's status, he changed its very nature?
Absolutely. And that transformation from a persecuted faith to a state religion created tensions and contradictions that Christianity has been wrestling with ever since. How does a religion founded by a man who said, "My kingdom is not of this world," handle worldly power? That's a question Christians are still grappling with today, 17 centuries after Constantine saw that cross in the sky.
Wow. That was just so fascinating, Adrian. I think we've really covered so much ground today about Constantine and this, massive turning point in Christian history.
Thanks, Anna. It's such an amazing story, From persecution to power in just one generation. That's the kind of dramatic shift that really changes everything.
It really does seem like one of those pivotal moments in history where, everything changed. So, just to summarize what we've learned today, Constantine had this vision before the Battle of Milvian Bridge, defeats his rival, and then Christianity goes from being this persecuted minority religion to eventually becoming the official religion of the Roman Empire.
Exactly. And through things like the Edict of Milan and the Council of Nicaea, Constantine didn't just legalize Christianity, he fundamentally reshaped it. He gave it structure, resources, and political backing that completely transformed how Christianity operated in the world.
And the legacy of that transformation is still with us today in so many ways, from church buildings to religious holidays to the very relationship between faith and political power.
Absolutely. The Christianity we know today was profoundly shaped by Constantine's conversion. The doctrine, the organization, the traditions. So much of it traces back to that pivotal moment when the Roman Empire and Christianity became intertwined.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Adrian, for sharing all your knowledge about this fascinating topic on faith fuel freedom today. You've really helped me understand this critical moment in religious history.
It was my pleasure, Anna. I'm always excited to talk about these transformative historical moments that still echo in our world today.
And to all our listeners out there, thanks so much for joining us on this journey from persecution to power. We hope you'll tune in next week for another episode of Faith Fuel Freedom, where we'll be diving into another fascinating chapter in the story of faith throughout history. Until then, keep fueling your faith and embracing freedom.